Thank you again to everyone for joining us this afternoon. A huge welcome to Family Mediation Week. To those of you who are here for the first time, for those of you who have come to lots of these talks or have been to a few talks today, you're very, very welcome. This is the first opportunity that we've done within Family Mediation Week to really focus on the education sector and for education professionals, which is a hugely exciting topic and crucially important for a lot of people that we are working with. So you are all very, very welcome. I might have to start again now, just so many people, so many more people have joined. Welcome to those who've joined. Thank you again for joining. And again, welcome to Family Mediation Week. As I said, if this is your first time joining us in Family Mediation Week, then welcome. We've probably, you've perhaps heard about this one from myself or Leah or Anne Harry directly as the speakers. But if you're interested in this, please do have a look on the Family Mediation Week website. You will be able to find all the other talks that are happening this week. Loads of them will be of interest to you, I'm sure. And we encourage you to join as many as you possibly can, because they will all be of interest. But today we are going to be talking about mediation within the education world, how it looks, what is it all about, where do you fit in, and how can we all best support you in the work that you are doing. My name is James Evans. I'm the head of UK professional education at Our Family Wizard. Why am I hosting this talk is probably the first question some of you are asking. So I've been working in family law for just over 5 years now. I work for Our Family Wizard, which is a co-parenting app. But my journey into family law and the world of separation, divorce, mediation has come through education. I was a teacher for about four and a half years in the Brighton and Sussex area. I went to Sussex University, and whilst I was there, I did some part-time teaching, and I've done teaching private sector, in the public sector, and with both senior and junior schools. So I've got a reasonably good experience and journey through education, and I'm very passionate about helping children at an early stage, both in school and out of school. So it made a lot of sense for me to do a talk focusing on this topic where we can help as many people as possible. For a bit of context as to about what we do at Our Family Wisdom, I'm going to start off by sharing my screen. Hopefully you can all see the slides there and that glorious picture of little 6-year-old me. When we usually do our training, this is the slide I finish with to remind people that the important work that we're doing here is to try and help the children. But we're going to start with that message this week, purely because, the core of everything we're doing in Family Mediation Week and Our Family Wizards is to help children. We all want smiley, happy children. That is at the core of everything we're doing. And I know as a teacher and as education professionals in the room that is your goal as well, no matter whether that's through the class you're teaching or through helping a child away from a lesson in the playground or whatever it might be. This is at the core of everything we want to do. So we want to start with the image of a happy, smiley child and see how we get on. That is me wearing my older brother's cricket gear. My older brother might be on this call. He's a head teacher in Leamington Spa, so I've invited him along. Nick, if you're watching, I still play cricket and I still wear that helmet. So I don't know if it means I have a really big head or if your helmet was too small for me. Either way, we're keeping it in the family, but we're also keeping it in education. You've got my number and email address there. If anything I'm about to talk about sounds of particular interest or relevance to you, then please do drop me an email. Please do drop me a call. We're happy to come and speak to anyone at any point. So what do I do? So I work for a company called Our Family Wizard, and Our Family Wizard are the sponsors of Family Mediation Week, one of the sponsors we've got for this week of webinars and sessions. Now, Our Family Wizard offers a co-parenting app for parents going through divorce or separation or some sort of family breakdown. Now, when I was teaching, I would see examples of children who are caught in the middle of a really nasty breakdown or separation. I can think of one particular example where I was a form tutor and I would have a look at the child's homework book before the weekend so that I could know they'd marked everything down correctly. And I remember specifically an example where within that no homework book, I had seen a handwritten message that was from one parent intended for the other parent, and they were going through a separation. And I remember thinking that the message itself was so horrid, so difficult, so nasty. And they knew that the child was going to read that. It was right there in their homework book, but it was the only means of communication for the parents through the child. It's not productive, as we all know, and it's going to damage the child in some capacity. We always thought there had to be something better, something more modern that was going to help facilitate child-focused communication. And that's what our Family Wizard does. It provides a platform to guide parents through their communication before, during, or after divorce and separation. They have access to all of these features, which you can see on screen, that will help them with this. They've got a vast co-parenting calendar where they can put in the schedule. That's everything to do with school, after school clubs, weekends, whatever it might be. Messages where they can send each other direct messages, and they are included tone meter, so it gives them guidance on their language. If they're writing something potentially harmful, it will let them know if they're doing that. They can record their expenses, so you owe me £20 for the school shoes. You can then split it on the system. An info bank to store information about the child. So what size is their skirt for next year? What size hockey stick do they need? They can put that in there for both parents to see. There's a journal where they can upload pictures and videos so they can safely share them without having to use social media, and they can share their location without tracking each other. So again, it encourages more focused communication. And if you're working with a mediator, they can have access to. And there's loads more information you can find out about our Family Wizard, and we'll probably pick it up as this conversation goes, but that is what we are here to do. If you want to know more information about that, please do get in touch. Right, that's it from me. I'm going to pass it on to Leah, who's going to talk more about mediation. Now, I'll also caveat this. You've got your chat box is up there on your Zoom screen. We want this to be as interactive and engaging as possible. So if you have a question for me, Leah, or Anne Harrod, or anything to do with the education mediation world, ask us. This is the time. There's no question too difficult. We will take it on, and we will try our best to answer those questions. So I'll pass it over to you, Leah. Now, for everyone's reference, Leah is an accredited mediator. She's been accredited since 2015. She's the director of her own mediation service. She's a trainer for the Family Mediators Association and the treasurer as well. So she's got a lot of experience and is certainly the right person to talk about this. So Leah, over to you.
Thank you. I don't need the slide at the minute, James. So are you right to bring me back?
Let's do it.
Yeah, and share the screen so then I can see everybody.
That's
So where I wanted to start was to say this is all quite timely. It's always good to be focusing and thinking about the needs of children when parents separate. But as some of you are aware, and actually I will come on to this in a second, some of you are members of, there was a report by the Family Solutions Group that was presented to Parliament in November. The report is called A Child's Right to Matter. And fortunately for you, less so for me, we've got at least 2 members of the Family Solutions Group with us today. So if you've got any questions, yeah, thanks Beverly and Carly for showing up and putting me on the spot. But it's a really timely, I think, exercise to be tuning in and thinking about the needs of children when parents separate. So I'm going to do a job of maybe just trying to simplify some of what the report said. But actually, if you've got any questions, I'm sure Beverly and Carly would be delighted to answer them at the end as well. So I think some of the key messages aren't going to necessarily be any surprise to all of us. I think the starting point is, as I think a lot of us will know, is that children are at risk of harm when parents separate. And what the report says, family breakdown, it's a time of great vulnerability. Research has consistently shown that unresolved parental conflict is harmful to children. I don't think that necessarily comes as a shock to any of us. I think what the report has highlighted, though, is that for most people, the turning point is still the courts. For parents, that's still the avenue that they look to, and actually an awful lot of government funding is still going into the family justice system. And what the report highlights is that that's not always going to be the best place for families to turn to. The function of the courts is to take on the role of parental decision making. I will come on to this in terms of where mediation sits, but when parents go to court, they're effectively saying somebody else, i.e. you, a magistrate, a judge, I want you to make this decision for me. What we need to be more focused on is how we promote collaborative parental decision making, which really places children at the heart of that. So courts have a place, of course they do, but there needs to be more focus and emphasis on how we encourage parents to be working together, communicating collaboratively, and really trying to best address and meet the needs of their children. So there needs to be a shift in the language and culture of how we as a society respond to parental separation. And what that looks like and what the recommendations of the report says is it needs to include access and information for parents who are separating, but particular emphasis on children being heard and being able to access information for themselves. So at the minute, there isn't a consistent place where children can access information, because what it shines through in an awful lot of the research and reports is children want to be listened to and they want to be included and they want information. So that really is the starting point for thinking about then what services are out there. I'm a family mediator, so I guess what I'm here to talk to you about is family mediation as a service. I think I need to, maybe there's a lot of mediators here, but I'm also conscious that there won't be mediators here. So I wanted firstly to just say, well, what is family mediation? In simple terms, it's a process that brings people together and helps them to make decisions together. It's a forum that facilitates conversation, that encourages people to collaborate and make decisions. So where that sits with parents, it's about saying, actually, if you don't agree on arrangements for children, mediation is a service that helps you to come together and have those conversations and try and make those plans together. Fundamentally, when people disagree, I'm going to focus this on conversations involving children, but when people don't agree on what arrangements for children look like, whether that's who they live with, the time they spend with each parent, who they spend their birthdays with, Christmases with, they've got two, very broadly speaking, main options. They either find a way of having a conversation and negotiating and sorting that out together, or if they can't agree, they go to the courts. And as I say, they hand over that decision-making function to somebody else. This idea here of kind of, I've forgotten which side I'm on now, but of making decisions together, I think you can split down broadly into three main ways that might happen. One, as a mediator, I would say is a kitchen table negotiation. Two people sitting down without any other professionals involved at a table and trying to have those conversations together. Now, we know, and any other professionals that have experience of parents separating will know, it's maybe not as easy as that, because there will be emotion involved, there will be context to that decision making, and it can be hard. It can be quite hard for those two people to just sit down and have a conversation together. So another way traditionally maybe of people trying to make plans together still, but using professionals, might look like asking a solicitor to become involved, and then correspondence back and forth between solicitors to try and come to a set of plans or arrangements. A third option, and this is what family mediation is for me as a family mediator effectively to pull up a seat at that table that they're sitting at. So they still retain that role of making the decisions, but I manage that conversation as a family mediator. So I give them a forum to have a conversation in. I give a process for them. I give a structure and a focus to the conversations that they're having. And I manage the way that they're communicating as well. So there's skills and techniques that I'm using as a mediator, which might look like reframing questions or information. If it's a little bit spiky, it might look like summarizing and helping each person to listen to what the other person is saying. But it's about helping them to really remain focused on plans for the future and remain focused on what their children need. And that's what I encourage and do as a family mediator. There are certain benefits to family mediation. The big one is that it's collaborative. It's getting parents working together and having conversations together. And the courts, they have a place, they're going to be necessary in certain situations, but parental decision making is ongoing. It isn't just one issue. It isn't just one dispute. It's something that parents will need to keep doing. So actually giving them the tools, giving them the assistance to be making those decisions themselves and working collaboratively is a big kind of bonus of why family mediation is a good process for people. I guess more cynically, it is a much cheaper process by and large than, or should, we don't like to say we're cheaper as family mediators. We like to say we're the less expensive option. It's less expensive potentially than using solicitors, and it's potentially an awful lot quicker than going through a court process. I think the average time currently for a child application, a private law child application to be resolved in the family courts, I think is 47 weeks, whereas in mediation, you can get a resolution with 2 or 3 mediation appointments. So there are benefits to family mediation, but it's that sense that it's actually encouraging and helping parents to work together collaboratively. So, as I said, our role as mediators, what we do is we provide a structure for that conversation by setting an agenda, by kind of keeping track of time and making sure that conversations stay focused. We can also provide legal and other information. So we provide legal information, but we can also signpost people out to any other services that might be useful to them, whether it's benefits advice or just the literature, the resources that are out there on co-parenting. And we also help clients maybe to frame their thought processes by encouraging them to think about what their children need from them, what their hopes and their wishes are for their children, and try and maybe pull them away from the conflict that's there and existing between the pair of them. We can also be quite challenging as family mediators, as long as we're doing it in an even-handed and impartial way, so we can reality test what's being said and any plans that are being made. So that's in very broad terms, and I'm conscious that there are family mediators here, so I hope I've sort of done justice to the idea of what family mediation looks like, but that's what it is as a service. What I wanted to talk a bit more about is that there is also the option of child inclusive family mediation, and that involves bringing a child into the mediation process, child or young adult, in order for them to have their voices heard within the process. James, are you all right to stick the slides up now?
Let's get them up here. Can you see them now?
Yeah, perfect. So I'm a trainer for the FMA and I train people to become child inclusive mediators. And my co-trainer, Beverly, is also here, which again is brilliant and brilliant for all of you, but puts me slightly on edge. So thank you, Beverly, for scrutinising me, but I'm sure you are a friendly face. So child inclusive mediation, I think the starting point is to explain what it is, because I think it's a really important definition. And we find the definition of this in our standards as family mediators, the Family Mediation Council standards. And what it says is that child inclusive mediation provides opportunities for children and young people to have their voices heard directly during the process of mediation. So the starting point is child inclusive mediation enables children to feel heard in order to help them to feel respected and listened to. So that's the starting point for child inclusive mediation, and it fits in with the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, Article 12, which says that children should be consulted and listened to when decisions are being made that affect them. So it's respecting the UNCRC. The second element of the definition is that at the child or young person's request, we can pass on any messages to that child, young adults, parents or carers. So the first bit is facilitating the child or young adult being heard in decisions that affect them. The second bit is that it has a utility, a purpose, which is if the child agrees and with their authorisation, we can pass messages back to the parents within the mediation process, which can then assist with the parental decision making. James, if you want to go on to the next slide, please. So I wanted to highlight a bit of research, and it's a brilliant bit of research. And for any teachers that are listening, I think it's really helpful because it doesn't just deal with the with child inclusive mediation. It also looks at relationship education in schools. So it looks at the extent to which children benefit from information about relationships, education about relationships, but also benefit from being included within a child inclusive mediation process. And I think underpinning this and going back to the report of the Family Solutions Group, there's a real common thread that children want to be included and they want to be listened to, that they want to be treated with respect in all of this, and that parental separation, it's not just about something that's happening to the adults, it's something that has such a great impact on children's lives. And actually, if we don't include them by listening to them, they become disenfranchised from it. It can lead to frustrations, and it can tie into potential issues with their mental health if they don't feel listened to and included. So the findings of the research, and it's a bit of research that was done by Exeter University, and it's called the Healthy Relationship Project, the Hear and the Heart Project. It's a brilliant bit of research. It said that having your voice heard as a young person within child inclusive mediation is empowering and cathartic, and it brings benefits to children's mental health and well-being. This idea of speaking to a third party that is neutral, they're not there to draw up a report, they're there to facilitate your voice being heard as a child or young adult, is helpful because that person is empathetic. It's an ability to discuss things with that adult, and potentially things that they're unable to raise with their parents because they're worried about upsetting their parents, or they may feel conflicted and feel like it's not easy to share certain things with their parents. So having that neutral third person who's empathetic is helpful. And actually the final thing, kind of, there's lots of findings, but just to pull out, is that including children within the process helped children to feel that their parents cared about them. It helped them to understand more of what was happening, their options, and actually improve their communication with their parents. So I think that's everything that I wanted to chat about. I guess it's just making the point that the Family Solutions Group have said that there isn't a kind of one place to go for children. There's resources, but they're dotted around, and there's various recommendations that the report's made, which it would be useful potentially to look at. But this idea that there is maybe some confusion about where children go when their parents separate to get information, and to have a voice. Mediation is there as a service. It's there as a service for parents and it has a benefit of helping them to work together collaboratively to focus on decision making, which is centered on their children. But there's also the option of child inclusive mediation, which brings children into the mediation process and facilitates that job of them feeling included and having their voice heard, which kind of uniformly the research says is really important to children and young adults. I think that's everything that I thought it might be useful to share. So I will pass on to Anne Harrod.
Thanks, Leah. I'll introduce Anne Harrod in a moment. I just want to say thank you for outlining that. I think that there's going to be a lot of people on this call that this might well be their first ever introduction to mediation, and we've got a catalogue of wisdom on this call, both in our speakers and those joining, who are some of the brightest minds in this world. So please use this opportunity to ask them questions. If it's for you, if it's the case of I've never heard of mediation, but there are children in my school who are going through this process, or their parents are going through this process, how best can mediation support them? This is the time where we can really delve into that. I also think it's awareness. I mean, when I was teaching, I don't know if I was exposed to the methods of dispute resolution that were available to parents who are separating, but parents who are separating would come up in my class all the time, at least 1 in 3 children were having something going on at home that was affecting them by this. All I really knew what I was shown on the TV or what I read in the news, which I'm rather embarrassed to admit. But Johnny Depp and Amber Heard is a televised divorce. They go to law, they go to court, they get their lawyer, they have their day. That's what we're told, unless you're sort of looking into it. I'm hoping that for you listening in the educational world, this is the door opening that you need to help the children in your classes and help their parents and point them towards the most effective form of resolving that issue. Go on, Leah.
I just remembered I'd forgotten something, which is
Sure.
to make the point that actually it can be free for people as well. So there is legal aid available for family mediation for people that are on a low income. It's unlike legal aid via solicitors, there doesn't need to be evidence of domestic violence or abuse. So it's there potentially as a free service. For people that don't qualify for legal aid, there is a Ministry of Justice voucher, which provides a contribution. So it's worth being aware that it can be a free service or a subsidised service.
I think that makes a big difference to a lot of people. So check it out. How can they access the voucher, Leah? I get asked that all the time.
So it's accessed via a family mediator. So the family mediator makes the application for the voucher on the client's behalf.
Perfect. Thank you. Super. Okay, we're going to hear from our last speaker before we open up the floor to questions. It's a pleasure to introduce Dr. Anne Harrod-Brodkin. Had the pleasure of working with Anne Harrod for a few years now. She's wonderful, and you're all very lucky to hear from her today. Anne Harrod is a clinical psychologist. She runs an online course called What About Henry, which I encourage you all to go and look at after this. It's superb. She is also the co-author of the Split Survival Kit, which is a must-read. So a valuable wealth of knowledge and a provider of resources. So thanks for joining us, Anne Harrod. I'll pass over to you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It really is a pleasure to be here. Thank you. So I'm happy to go straight into my slides, James, if that's
Perfect.
okay.
Yeah, let's go for it.
So as James says, I'm a clinical psychologist. I've been working with children and families for a very long time. I was just counting them up actually. So over 22 years, and around mental health in general, but over more recent times, in particular around divorce, because we know is kind of a real biggie when it comes to child mental health. And this work has sort of taken me into just wonderful, wonderful places that I would not have been in, like here today, for example, if I'd have just stayed in my clinical room doing mental health stuff. So it's a real pleasure to be here. And as part of where it's taken me, it's been lovely to have a book written by myself and Ruth Fitzgerald, who's a children's author, called the Split Survival Kit. And that's 10 steps for children to sort of work at and work towards when they've gone through a divorce or going through a divorce or about to go through a divorce with their parents, just to help them learn how to deal with it all. So when I was asked to be, well, actually, I think I kind of just pushed my way in to be here, because I just think it's so important to talk to teachers, anyone in education about this, because as James said, you're there every day working with children, and yet the information and the advice and the support that you're given to help them with the countless thousand things that they'll present with is often not there or is forgotten. Or so I just thought it might be useful for me to remind you, or maybe inform you for the first time, of what the research says about divorce and children. So being aware of time, I just thought, right, I'm going to narrow it down to 5 headlines from psychology research. Number 1, it's so obvious, isn't it? Divorce impacts every area of a child's life. And I know it's obvious, but I thought we really need to think about this, because we know, don't we? Everyone knows divorce is difficult for children. It has negative consequences for most children going through it. But what does that actually mean? And what is it about divorce that creates those impacts? So I thought, well, let's have a think about divorce here. So when a child is going through a parental divorce, or is about to, or has been through a parental divorce, even though this divorce is happening in the family home, behind the closed doors and involving a little group of people in terms of that immediate family, the ripple effects of that parental divorce is enormous for that child for the rest of their lives, and in every aspect of a child's life. So what we do know from research is, for example, that divorce impacts schoolwork. So we know that children who are going through a divorce, or they might have been through a divorce a couple of years previously, it's not necessarily immediate, as we'll see later on, but that their focus, their attention, their concentration, their memory will be impacted by the stress and the uncertainty of the divorce. So chances are they won't be able to focus quite so well. They'll be a little bit more fidgety in class. They won't be able to plan their homework or organize their stuff quite as well as they used to before. And also their motivation can drop. So certainly a lot of the teenagers that I work with will say to me, what's the point in doing history homework? Like my family's falling apart. It's awful. What's the point of doing my homework? Nobody cares. It doesn't really matter anyway. It all goes wrong. So they can have these quite helpless and hopeless thoughts about life in general, which then impacts on their motivation to do schoolwork. So we know that divorce can impact schoolwork. We also know that divorce can impact friendships. So when we are with our friends, we're acting out things that we see in other places. So we might see people doing certain things on TV and we think, oh, that's how you should be with your friends. When it comes to children, they're testing things out all the time anyway, because they're learning how to be. But if they're coming from a family life which is full of aggression and criticism and hostility and nastiness and meanness, then there is every chance that that is what they're going to bring to their friendships, not consciously at all, but they'll find themselves getting a little bit more aggressive or a bit nastier or being a little bit more excluding of others because they're just trying to make sense of it all in their heads and they're just trying to figure it all out. But they're also full of probably quite difficult feelings, frustration, annoyance, all of those. And you know what it's like, the people that you take out those feelings on are the people who are closest to you, so our friends, our family. So they can often have quite significant friendship difficulties because of the divorce. And we know that there's also probably a higher chance of being a bully as well, or bullying, possibly again because of what they see at home and all of the conflict there. But we know unhappy children are more likely to bully because it becomes a power play. They feel so rubbish about themselves that by making somebody else feel rubbish, they can almost feel a little bit of relief from their own rubbishness. So we also know that in terms of peer relationships, there can be some difficulties. Divorce also affects mental health. So we know children who have gone through a divorce have a higher likelihood of suffering from anxiety and depression. But we also know that it can impact on self-esteem, self-identity. So however much a parent will tell their child, it's not your fault that me and mum or me and dad are divorcing. We love you. It's nothing to do with you. It is just about as grown-ups. A child, because of the way they see the world and view things, will inevitably be thinking, yeah, but if I was a bit cleverer, nicer, prettier, funnier, kept my room tidier, wasn't quite so annoying, maybe you would still be together. So they can't help but kind of think that. And that is going to have an impact on their self-esteem. They're going to feel rubbish about themselves and potentially quite unlovable. And this is going to have a real impact on them, especially at different points of their child development journey. And we also know it can affect behavior. So children who are going through a divorce are more likely to be aggressive and have emotional regulation difficulties, we call them, where they're overwhelmed with feelings. So if they're stressed, it will come out in a load of panic. If they're sad, it will come out in a big sort of breakdown of crying and just sitting in a corner. If they're angry, it will be a chair will get thrown. That actually it's hard for them to keep the emotions in. It will come out as behavior, which we then as adults will view as non-compliant, naughty, controlling, manipulative. So certainly when I'm working with parents who are going through divorce, at certain points they'll say to me, well, I think my child's becoming a little bit more controlling. And I'm like, are you surprised? Because when we feel anxious, one of the ways that we deal with that anxiety is by trying to control things around us. So when all this stuff is happening, being able to control what shoes you're wearing, what you're going to have for lunch, what time you're going to go to bed can become quite appealing, because you're thinking, well, at least I can control these things. So if I'm an 8-year-old going through a divorce and everything has been turned upside down, then most definitely I will become quite controlling. I'll be refusing to go to bed when I've been asked. I'll be refusing to get out of the bath when I've been told to. Those kinds of behaviors. And you'll see it in school as well, that they'll be a little bit less likely to be able to go with the rules because they're feeling so anxious. They're trying to control bits of their life, anything basically anything that they can control, they're going to try and control it. So often that is, viewed negatively by adults because they're trying to get on with their job or trying to parent them. And this can cause sort of then vicious cycles of self-esteem dipping even more. And we also know that divorce can impact on extracurricular activities. So when children are involved in teams or groups or have something outside of school that they can feel good about themselves doing, then that's really, really important. And often what we'll see in divorce is either for financial reasons or for practical reasons, we just can't get a lift there at the time, that children's sort of extracurricular lives are quite narrowed down as a result of the divorce. So they spend a lot of time, more time, let's say, at home, not with friends, not with different groups, not with different adults, at home. Chances are they're on the devices and starting to feel quite lonely. So that's just a very whistle-stop tour of the research, which shows what the impact of divorce is on children. And we can see, can't we? There's no bit of a child's life that is unaffected by divorce. So number 2 headline is that it's not the divorce in itself that is particularly impactful. It is 2 main factors to do with a divorce that really, really makes it difficult for a child to feel okay. And that's conflict and parental absence. So conflict, I mean, it's no surprise, is it? If you have, I don't know, friends that that bicker quite a bit, or if you've got colleagues that get quite stressy with one another, you'll know that feeling of being in a room with 2 people, 3 people, whatever, who are arguing, and you get that whoosh of kind of adrenaline yourself, and part of you just wants to hide away and run away, and another part of you wants to step in and stop the horrible conflict happening. So imagine as a child living at home and having to deal with that, or sitting in the back of the car during handover when mum and dad are having yet another argument. That actually conflict is very stressful, and we know that if you live with chronic stress, it can impair and impact your psychological development as well as your physical development. So it can have real short-term and long-term effects on how you then deal with stress yourself. So witnessing conflict is really, really unhelpful for a child. It's just not pleasant in any way for them. And when you're living kind of in a family where the 2 parents are together who argue, that's fine, because you can witness arguments, and if they're made up, that's fine. As a child, you can learn, okay, you can have disagreements, you can be a bit overwhelmed at times, but it's okay. But during a divorce, when there is high conflict and is never resolved, that is very difficult for a child to deal with. And then parental absence is the other big factor that causes difficulties for children. So children love their 2 parents, and they might be, according to, let's say, when I'm working with mums, they're like, oh, their dad's a narcissist. And then I'm working with the dads, and then they're saying, oh my God, the mum's a nightmare. Whatever the 2 adults think of one another, to the child, it doesn't matter. They love their parents. We don't love our parents according to how nice they are or how good they've been. We love them because they're our parents. So this is a sort of non-negotiable for children. And it's very hard for parents who literally loathe their ex to imagine and understand that their child still loves them. They may not particularly enjoy seeing them at times, or not like it when they get all cross or something, but they love them still. So children are literally heartbroken when they lose contact with a parent. So let's say what traditionally or typically happens is dad moves out of the family home, and suddenly a child won't see dad every day, or not even every week, or it might be quite a long time before they get to see dad again. And by then, a lot has been said, a lot of things have happened, which then can really make a child feel uncertain about, is dad going to go away for good? Is he ever going to come back again? And so it can be very difficult for a child to understand that a parent can just be removed from the family situation. It's very difficult to get their heads around. They will be blaming themselves. They'll be trying to figure out, what can I do differently to get mum back or dad back? And when I'm talking to dads especially, they'll say, well, I realized I wasn't helping the situation. I just thought if I just step back for a little while, things will calm down, and then I'll go back and connect again with my children. And that's when I've got to say to them, well, the research shows any absence for any length of time is going to have an impact on the child. So we have to be aware of that. Conflict and parental absence are the 2 biggies when it comes to divorce. Number 3, there is no set time frame. So when I was first finding out, learning about, being taught about divorce, we were told about the 2-year adjustment period. And you may have heard of this as well, but actually give most kids 2 years and they will be kind of okay. And there is some truth to it that 2 years after a divorce, there's a new norm, in terms of children have got used to things. Things have probably settled, and there's arrangements in place, and there's a little bit more familiarity and consistency. So it might be that there's 2 years, but when children are told, oh, don't worry, it's just going to be 2 years and then you'll be fine, it can feel quite difficult for some children to hear that, because they might think, oh my gosh, well, I'm 18 months in and I still don't feel anywhere near like being okay about the divorce. Whereas for other children, they might feel quite hopeful. Okay, I've only got another few months to go and it will feel okay. But basically, I don't mention timeframes to families or children that I'm working with at all. I don't think they help. And there's not really the evidence to say 2 years, you're fine. So instead, we talk about phases, we talk about transition phases, we talk about grieving stages, we talk about adjustment processes. So basically anything that helps people to see that they're on a journey. This is a path and a journey, and we're not quite sure what the destination is, but over time it'll become clearer. And that's why with this the split survival kit, we talked about it as a journey. So it's about what you're going to pack in your bag and obstacles on the way and things like that. But what is interesting as well about timeframes is that there seems to be a slight difference with genders. So with any research looking at different genders, there's always more similarities than differences. But what they have found is that boys can have more of an immediate sort of reaction to a divorce. So as the divorce is happening, all those bits that we've talked about, schoolwork, friendships, behavior, all of those things will be quite impacted. For girls, what you can see is that they look like they're coping, and adults around them will be going, oh yeah, no, they seem to be fine, actually they're just getting on with things, everything's fine. And then when those girls hit adolescence, or just about to hit adolescence, the wheels can fall off then. So there is potentially a delayed effect for girls compared to boys. Now this isn't absolutely for everybody, but the research does show there's a slightly different sort of time frame for girls and boys potentially. Number 4, children. What do children need? So we can't stop divorces. We can't stop them happening. And in many ways, we wouldn't want to, because what the research also shows is that children living in unhappy families are unhappy. So actually, if post-divorce, the family's adjusted to being happier and brighter, great. We wouldn't want to stop that divorce. What we need to do is help parents to divorce well, which is why mediation is so brilliant. And what do children need to help them get through the divorce? Well, it's 3 very basic things, really, but quite hard to put into place at the time, I'm aware. Consistency, confidence, and communication. So we know children love familiarity. They like change, of course, and novelty as well. But when it comes to family and life and day-to-day stuff, they love the routine, because then they don't have to think about it. They can let their minds, be preoccupied with all sorts of other lovely things instead. So they need consistency. And when divorce happens, that is the first thing to go. Everything that they knew before is changed. So helping parents to figure out ways of being consistent in how they do things is really important. So our family wizard is fantastic in that it brings parents together to work towards consistency. And we know that an organised house, when it comes to mental health factors we found to be really important for children, is having an organised family home. So this is a family home where you're not always rushing and being late, where you're not always forgotten things, where you're not always got parents going, oh my gosh, I can't believe you've forgotten that, we should have been there. Actually, they come from quite an organised house. That's really important. So consistency is very important. Confidence is very important. And the reason I put it in there is that when 2 parents are going through a divorce, their confidence is shot to pieces, both in terms of who they are as individuals, but who they also are as parents. They start questioning themselves. Does my child like me? Can I do this by myself? I keep losing my temper with them. I'm such a bad dad. I'm such a bad mum. So all these thoughts about parenting happen. And you can have quite skilled parents, but once a divorce kicks in and all the stress of the divorce, the kind of skills just melt away, and they become these parents who are like, yeah, just do whatever you want. I don't care. I haven't got the capacity to think about it. And role diffusion is the term given to this sort of just leaking away of capacity and roles as a parent. And this, when you're going through a divorce, this is what is so critical for a child. If a child then has 2 parents, they're not only are stressed and going through a divorce, but are also saying, I don't care when you go to bed. Seriously, just go to bed whenever you want. Or, oh, that's not my job anymore. No, I think that's your mum's job, or that's your dad's job. Or just not being a parent, not being a confident parent. This is so stressful for a child. We all need to believe as a child that our parents know what they're doing, even if they don't. We've got to believe it. So if you've got parents who are they've given up parenting, or they just don't know, they don't feel confident enough to do it, it could be really difficult. So that's when mediation, parenting support, even counselling for parents, parenting programs, just as a little top up to remind a parent, it's really, really important to keep boundaries, and it's really, really important to be available, and it's really, really important to stick to what you know, then that can help. And then communication is also critical. So research has shown that when families are working with schools, children are better off. And that could be across a whole range of issues, but especially when it's divorce. Communication between children and their parents is really important. And of course, the communication between parents is very important. I've worked with teenagers who they're 2 years in and they still haven't told their friends that their mum and dad are split up. And they're just like, I don't even know I don't know what words to say. I'm so embarrassed and I can't believe it's happened to me. And 2 years have passed and I still haven't told my friends. You know, every time they come over, I just say, oh, dad's out or whatever. So it's about helping children to communicate about it and about their needs. And again, in the split survival kit, we've got ways of it. We've got a communication plan for children to work towards, to be able to say to mum and dad, teachers, friends, granny, granda, whoever, this is what I'm feeling. This is what I need right now. Please, can you help? And the fifth, and hopefully most relevant to you, is what can schools do? Well, schools play a critical role in a child adjusting to divorce. And I don't want that to put pressure on you. You already in schools do 1,000 jobs in one day. And my mind boggles sometimes when I just think about what teachers have to do every day. So it's not about being a therapist. It's not about being a counsellor. It's not about being a social worker. I know you have to do bits of all of that, but it's just knowing that your position in that child's life at that time is so, so important. And in fact, your position in the school for that family at that point is so, so important, because it's probably the only neutral space. It's the only place that is consistent for a child, and it's possibly the only place where both parents can still feel that they can go to pick up their child, even if it is on separate days, and know what is happening. So it is so, so important. But there's proactive and reactive things that schools can do to help children. So proactive wise, it's things like having school policies and school training days and awareness raising things about how to work in partnership with parents, unless there's a safeguarding issue, of course, but how to work in partnership with both parents in order to help the child adjust to the divorce. And it might be things like having books around. So there's my book, but there's many, many other wonderful books also about divorce, and learning that actually families come in all different shapes and sizes. Just having things like that around as well can be really important, and having teachers who are confident to know where to go to get support, or where to direct parents if they're worried about their child. And in terms of the more reactive things, it's things such as being an active listener. You don't have to be a therapist. You don't have to try and change a child's life, but just listening, as I'm sure you'll all know, when you're going through a difficult time, sometimes you just want somebody to listen, and that could be enough just to help you feel a little bit better. So active listening, knowing that things like Mondays and Fridays are probably pretty tricky, because it might be that they're coming back from a weekend with one parent or going to a weekend with another parent. Knowing that what you don't want to do is lower expectations. So we know, don't we, from number one, that divorce impacts schoolwork. But what you don't want to do as a teacher is lower expectations, because that has found to have a sort of not a great effect on self-esteem. So a child, rather than thinking, oh, brilliant, I don't have to do my homework today, I feel great, because my teacher said it doesn't matter. They'll think, God, I must be really awful then if I don't have to have homework done. If, you know, they must think that I'm really bad or that I'm not capable of it. So weirdly, I know as adults that's quite hard to sort of imagine, but weirdly for children, it can feel quite negative to have expectations lowered for them. But what you can do, of course, is be more sort of aware of things that are going on, and just say, okay, well, you do need to bring your homework in on Friday when I see you next. I get it that it's in your dad's house and you haven't been there, but, you know, please, can you bring it on Friday? So it's being adaptable really around it, but not lowering your expectations. And it's things like not, so in the Child's Right to Matter report, one of the things that really struck me was children saying, we don't want to be just pushed into counselling. You know, if I go to a teacher and say, I'm just struggling with my mum and dad's divorce, being told, oh, well, I think you need counselling might be helpful for some, but for others, it feels like, oh, I just wanted someone to listen to me, actually. I don't necessarily want counselling. So it's being aware of that as well, and just thinking, if you can just listen and be aware, have some nice books around, have some chats, then that, and work in partnership with both parents, that would be the ideal. So I think all the little pictures that I've put down in the bottom have been mentioned. The split survival kit, the What About Me, A Child's Right to Matter report is brilliant. And then What About Henry, as James mentioned, I run a training course. It's a 6-week training course. It's 1 hour every Wednesday lunchtime. It's recorded if you can't make it. And it basically covers all of child mental health, child development, attachment, the impact of divorce, communication. So it's all about what do we need to know to help make good decisions about children when they're going through divorce. There we go. That's me done, James.
Oh, and Harry, thank you so very much. It's I've worked with you and heard you talk so many times, and yet I still learn something new every time. So thank you. I think it seems bizarre that we live in a world of 2024 where we are so, as a society, getting so much better about talking about taboo subjects that used to be difficult to talk about. Mental health being a good example, whereas it's in the PSHE curriculum, but divorce and separation, both for the parents and the children, seems to be a bit of a taboo still. And as you said, some children take 2 years to talk about it, which is harmful for everyone involved.
It's,
That's
it's
bizarre to me.
It is, it is. And I think some of the teachers that I've spoken to about it, they say, well, it's a private matter. And I get that, a family divorce can feel like a private matter, but that doesn't mean it could be ignored. We still need to be talking about it and acknowledging it and thinking about it. Yeah.
Absolutely. But it would be remiss of me. I have 1,000 questions that I could ask both you and Leah. But I'll have my opportunities. We've got about just under 10 minutes left. I'm going to use this time now for you listening. This is a chance. We've got 5-10 minutes. Let's just have a quick chat, if you don't mind. You can pop something in the chat, or please feel free to unmute yourself. But we'd love to hear from you as teachers or education professionals. What's been valuable for you today, and what more can we do as a community to better support you in schools? I think that's probably what we're most interested to hear from. So if anyone's feeling brave, go for it. If not, I'll waffle on and ask some questions.
Yeah, I think, James, it'd be really useful to know, like you say, what do you need at schools? What will help you to support children? What can we be doing to help you help them? But I did have a question for you, Leah, as well, actually, which is a bit
Yeah, that's good.
shameful that I don't know this. But
Okay.
how can you do you have to be referred for mediation, or can you just refer yourself?
You can refer yourself. In fact, most people do. So it's as simple as just calling a mediation service and saying that you want an appointment. The Family Mediation Council have got a tool, a Find a Mediator tool, or you can just Google family mediation and it'll bring up services. The first step in the process that we have, just so that people are aware, is that we meet with clients individually for what's known as a mediation information and assessment meeting. So we do quite a robust job of screening to make sure that mediation is going to be safe and appropriate. So you can refer people out in the knowledge that we're going to be doing that job of making sure that we're only going to be bringing people together to have conversations where it's safe and appropriate to do so.
It's probably worth saying, and it's a great question, and Harrod, thanks ever so much for raising it. It's probably worth saying that absolutely the Find a Mediator search facility will find accredited mediators and mediators registered with the Family Mediation Council, but there are other mediators out there who are not accredited and are not registered with the FMC, and so therefore are practicing. So if I'm just conscious that you said, Leah, look at the Find a Mediator site, or just search for mediators. And of course, if you search just for mediators, there is the possibility that you will get mediators who are not registered with the FMC, which is a governing body which holds professional standards and has a complaints process and holds mediators to account, where they have to re-register every 3 years, have to be re-accredited every 3 years, etc. So it's worth that bit of information because there are lots of mediators out there, and I think it's worth just highlighting that people should look for a mediator who's registered with the Family Mediation Council.
And it also means
Well, you're about to say, I bet, Leah.
it also means if they're not registered with the FMC, that they're not going to be able to offer the voucher or do legal aid work. So,
right.
Yeah, were we thinking along the same lines?
Absolutely, Leah. Of course we were. And also can't sign off court forms. Not that mediators like to think that what they're there for is court forms, but when we talk about people having to do MIAMs prior to going to court, it's FMCAs, that is accredited mediators with the FMC, who can sign off court forms. We don't like to be defined in that way, but
James, it looks like there's a good question in the chat. I don't know if you can
Super.
see.
Yeah. Thanks, Anna. And thank you, Beverly, as well. So Emma asks, what would the advice be for families where one parent does not want to mediate, but the other parent does?
Oh, I think that's probably a question for me. So, as I said, the starting point is that we invite people in for separate meetings. I think it's an opportunity at that separate meeting when we're meeting with either mum or dad to say and explore in a bit more detail what's going on, what are the circumstances, and how can we frame the offer of mediation to the other person in a way that might land with them. So I think there may be cases where somebody is intransigent in their view about family mediation. There's not an awful lot we can do because at the minute, we can't force people in to find out about mediation unless they're wanting to make an application to court. But what we can do is the person that's ringing us is probably going to be the person that's saying the other person doesn't want to mediate. We can say, well, let's explore this a bit by having a meeting with you, finding out maybe what the background is, what the reluctance might be, and how do we frame the offer to the other person in a way that they might be able to hear it.
That's really helpful, Leah. Thank you. I also think it's worth acknowledging that the processes in schools around the country is different at every school. So there's a journey there from the moment of acknowledgement, whether that be you as a teacher realizing that something has happened with a child and it's related to something going on with parents divorce or separating, to getting to the point of let's get them into mediation. There's a process and journey there. And I'll wear my teacher hat here and say it shouldn't be the responsibility of each individual teacher to be there to recognize all of that instantly, because you're thinking about 1,000 other things and doing that. So I would encourage you to now take what you've learned from this session, take it back to your staffing body, and just try and have some sort of process in place. If a member of staff in your school acknowledges the situation, and Harrod has done such a good outline of what those mannerisms or behaviors might look like in the child, what do? Do you take it to the school safeguarding officer? Perfect. What do? Do they signpost and are they referring? Excellent. Where are they signposting and referring to get them the right support as quickly as possible? Hopefully we've given you some of those steps today. It's the stuff in between which we encourage you to go and take away with your own schools and see what's in place. And I say that with go on, Leah. Yeah,
I was going to say I would place money on the fact that if you contact a mediation service as a teacher or as somebody with responsibility for what James has described and say, I've got some questions, how does this work? I'm sure most family mediators would be delighted to chat to you and give you some more information.
And you can contact all of us after this session. If you have questions, if you'd like us to come and speak to your staff, we would be more than happy to do so. It's something we can do online like this, or we can travel. We're very happy to do so. And I say that with 1 minute left on our call. So if there's any burning questions, please pop them in the chat and ask now. But if not, I'll say a huge thank you to both Leah and Harrod for their time today. I think this has been really helpful and really brought me back to my teaching days, but also put things into perspective as to where we are in terms of bringing mediation to the education world. It is crucially important. And we're all hopefully trying to get to the same goal here. So hopefully this is a step in the right direction. More to come. And as I said, for those of you who this is the only session you're joining today, this is day 1 of Family Mediation Week. So you've got 4 more days left. Please look on the website. There are loads more sessions that are really, really, really interesting. I encourage you to register for as many as you can and keep in touch with everyone involved.